Hello, everybody. Welcome to the HR Roundtable. I'm PJ Trudeau. It is wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited today to be talking about management training and trying to find the best way to do it. It is probably one of the most common questions that comes up during our roundtables and when we have discussions. Can you help with management training? Does anyone have a great template? How do you go about doing it? We are in this new environment that isn't so new anymore, but it is an ever-changing one. And being hybrid, we're constantly looking at new ways to help keep our managers trained, make sure that they're up to date, make sure that if they're brand new managers, they know how to train, and just in general, being able to ensure that they have the tools in order to be successful in what we need them to do. So as a result, we have an expert with us today who is going to be able to really help us figure out what we need to be doing and find out the best way for us to do that. So Karen Snyder has spent 32 years working as a trainer, presenter, retreat leader, coach to senior leaders, and consultant. Her clients have included NASA, the EPA, as well as several pharmaceutical manufacturing and nonprofit organizations. She's a certified speaker and a certified facilitator. I'm going to turn it over to Karen and let her tell us how to go about doing this. Karen.
Thank you so much, PJ. When PJ and I first started talking, we talked about different topics. She said this was a topic that could be helpful. And I got so excited about it because I actually do have 32 years of experience with this type of work, and I've seen what a difference training can make. So I just finished telling her it's going to become one of my very favorite topics. So let's jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. And good. And so one of the things that I'm going to share with you today is I'm going to talk to you about every wallet. So one of the things that every wallet, every budget. So what can you do if you have a robust training budget, and I like to call it not just training, but employee development, because I think training can come in many different ways. And I want you to think in addition to classroom training, there's so many different other ways that training can be delivered. But before we jump into that, let me ask you to put in the chat, and I'm trying, there we go. If you'll put in the chat, what are some of the people problems in your workplace? Chatting about that, because I know you have them. I can't wait to start reading about them. Okay, communication, absolutely. That is definitely something that can be solved with training for sure. Supervisor and employee conflict. And there's not just supervisor and employee conflict, but there's so many other times of conflict. Not just, like I said, supervisor, there's conflict between divisions, there's conflict with vendors, there's conflict in every different ways. Struggling with feedback, employee conflict, trouble collaborating, avoiding tough conversations, those all go into that same bucket of communication. Workload, how to manage workload, how to de-stress from workload. Manager not given timely and honest performance feedback, absolutely. Lack of feedback. Cliques and silos, do you know that that can be solved with retreats, employee development, and training? They all can. High-performing employees who are poor supervisors. Yes, one of the things we know is that people get promoted based on their technical skills, and they don't always have the interpersonal skills to be good managers, effective managers. Engagement, accountability, communication. Allison says avoiding conflict. Melanie says difficult personalities, a lack of training. So all of you see this engagement. Absolute engagement can be so much enhanced by training. So we see all the different employee problems. I did not see a single one. I was skipping through them. PJ, if you can help me, do you see any that might not be addressed by employee development? I didn't see a single one, but maybe all of you are helping me with that.
No, these are all ones that I think we commonly see and are all the same challenges that we're always trying to address with managers.
Right, right. So when I was thinking about it a couple of days ago, I was thinking, are there any employee problems that cannot be addressed with training? And the answer, I couldn't come up with any. But that doesn't mean, I'm sure there are some, but we won't work hard at that. But most of these issues can be, all of the issues we've got here can be addressed with employee training, with coaching, with mentoring, with employee development. So there's the argument right there on employee training. Now, let me give you a little bit. PJ said that I had been doing this for 32 years, but I literally used to live and I used to work for Sovereign Bank. And for those of you who lived in Maryland, you know Sovereign Bank is now NationsBank. And I worked at it at the time when it was Sovereign Bank. Actually, when I was hired by Suburban Bank, which really goes way back. And I was the director of training and employee development. And what I want to tell you about that is that at the time, I worked with this wonderful woman. Her name was Delia, and she's given me permission to tell this story. And she was in charge of our teller training program. And one of the things that she did, because she had a heart of gold, is she would promote, she would pass almost everybody who went through teller training. And sometimes those same people that she passed would move into the branches, into the bank, and they would not be successful as tellers. And when we would look at why, they didn't have the basic addition and subtraction skills that was necessary for them to be successful tellers. And so we started to look at this problem. It was like, well, how did they pass teller training, which has a lot of addition and subtraction and a lot of practice? How did they pass that if they couldn't do basic math? And what we found out was she would help them a lot. And so she didn't see the cause and effect of letting people, helping people, promote people. She was a firm believer in helping everybody succeed, which was part of what made her so absolutely wonderful. So what we learned from that was that she needed individual coaching and mentoring to see what the outcome was for those people. For those people she thought she was helping, because they would eventually get fired. And that was terrible, and she was heartbroken. And so what we did was we did coaching for her, and it worked. And I share this story with Delia, first of all, because it unwinds the training of, you know, if there's still a problem after teller training, what is the problem? And sometimes you have to look deeper. And it was her coaching and development that needed help. So sometimes when there's a problem still after you do the coaching, the training, you have to look deeper and say, where is the rudimentary training? But let's get into what are some of the things that we want to talk about today. We're going to cover what topics should be included in leadership training. How should the training be delivered? What is the gold standard? If you had the biggest budget ever, and some organizations have a pretty hefty training budget, what would you design for your organization? And then we're also going to look at if you don't have that enormous budget, what if you have no budget at all? Then what are you going to do, and how are you going to deliver training? So we're going to do a poll, and PJ is going to bring up the poll, and let's see where we are right now in terms of which of these best describes what your company is currently offering. A comprehensive program covering many topics, including lunch and learn, seminar series, peer-to-peer support, mentoring, all different kinds of employee development. Basic or maybe basic on-the-job training. Here's what you need to know in order to run this software program. C, sexual harassment, safety, and compliance training. D, we aren't doing anything, and that's why I'm here. I want to change that. And yay for you, because you've got lots of opportunity. So let's see what, PJ, what'd you find? And the numbers are coming in. Okay. We still have numbers coming in. It's looking mostly like sexual harassment, safety, and compliance training at 34%, but a fair number of you, 22% of you, are offering what you would call a comprehensive program. Yay, good for you. That's fantastic. All right, so we've got every kind of group, every type of organization represented in terms of what's been going on in terms of training. And that's good for me to know as we talk about this. Okay. So thinking about, this is going to be the hardest thing I'm going to ask you to do today, but I'm going to ask you to get out a scratch sheet of paper unless you're really good at mental math. And I want you to think about whatever you put in the chat, remembering what the problems were, those employee problems that we talked about at the beginning. What do you think the cost is? What is the associated cost of not providing this management training? Now, and you're going to put that in the chat. And I'm going to continue to talk as you're thinking, which is hard. What I want you to think about is, if you have silos, is that preventing you from coming up with new products or services for your customers? And what are those opportunity costs? And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, Karen, I have absolutely no idea at all, start doing some wild guesstimates and go wild and then bring it back. If you have a retention issue, you probably know what your cost per hire is. What is that costing you? And let's see what you got in the chat. We've got a couple people chatting. So Allison says, turnover of top performers, Ayoka. Can you try to figure that out a little bit in terms of money? I'm going to ask the same thing of Allison. And the reason that I'm going to ask you to try to put dollar amounts with these things that you're coming up with is because that's how I want you to talk about it when you are in meetings with your senior leaders. And they're going to say, where do you get these numbers? And then you're going to start asking questions. Well, what do you think this cost? And did you know about this? So while I agree with you 100%, not training costs a lot more. Let's try to put some dollar amounts with it. And for those of you who are really struggling, not many people wrote in the chat about that. Anybody have any comments or questions about how to figure that out? Because we can do one as a case study right now.
Karen, I think that'd be a great idea. And I think what you said makes perfect sense. It's the fact that a lot of us, when we're thinking about training, knowing that we need it, the business leaders and our leadership needs to hear how much money we're looking at potentially losing with turnover or with, as Mary just put in all the different, all these different things. Putting a dollar amount to them is going to speak volumes to them versus us just saying, hey, we need to do this.
Right. So does anybody want us to help you figure out what it is for your organization? Because that would be, I think, helpful for everyone. We'll do it as a case study together. All right, I don't see. Let's see if I have anything else.
There's several people in the chat that are saying they'd love to.
Okay, yes, well, since I picked on Allison, legal fees can be significantly significant and hard to estimate. I agree with that, Patricia. But I'd like to get before we even get to legal fees. So let's help Allison. Allison, if you'll if you're comfortable sharing being visible on screen, that would be fantastic. And will you tell us about your situation and we'll walk through it together. I'm going to whip out my calculator here. Allison, I'm ready.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you beautifully.
Great.
Thank you for volunteering to do this. I hope it'll be helpful. And if it's not helpful, if we don't get you what you need, I'll get online with you later today or next week, and we'll really do a serious one for you.
No, I appreciate it. So yeah, my allot was definitely a vague yeah, so I don't know, in my experience, when we don't train, especially our managers, we have turnover, we have employee relations issues, we have lack of reduced productivity. And I find I'm spending just a lot of time cleaning up or helping fix versus moving forward. So yeah, I mean, of course I could try to put some numbers on that, but would love some support and maybe working through that.
Okay, so turnover, I would literally, first of all, I think you can put some extremely rough numbers together for everything you said. But the best thing you're going to do is when you start talking about these things, you're going to say, well, let's do some of them. Okay, so turnover. You're going to take the number of people in the last year who have turned over. And you're not going to consider the fact that one left because they were transferred. We're just really doing averages, okay? So we're not going to get into what all the reasons they said, because what we know about turnover is that when people have decided to leave, they can come up with reasons, and they do. And if we really want people to stay, we have to be extraordinarily creative and flexible about how to get them to stay. So we always have a choice. I can tell you that for the right price and creativity, all of us will stay anywhere. But that's not, I realize that's not always an option, but these are averages. So you're going to look at the cost per hire, and hopefully you know that for your organization. And if not, okay, if not, then we're not going to probably do that today together, but that's going to be one of your goals, is figure out your cost per hire, because this is one you also can use Shuram and other resources. You can Google cost per hire at this level, cost per hire at this level. And I'm perfectly happy with those numbers. Until somebody comes up with better numbers, literally we can Google these things. Cost per hire at this level, cost per hire at this level. And you can figure it out that way. You certainly can add in if you've used any type of firms to help you with this. So you're going to get a cost for that. Okay. Reduce productivity. You need to start observing it. And you need to see how, if nothing else, document the reduced productivity. All the amount of time spent in your, I mean, for one thing, you can just keep numbers on how much you are spending time doing it, which is the very least of what we want to be doing, but that we actually can completely 100% measure. Okay. You said something in between turnover and reduced productivity, and I missed it. What was that?
Gosh, I don't remember either. Maybe somebody else. Yeah, what else was it?
All right. Well,
and some of it is, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say, Allison?
Beyond just reduced productivity, it might have been just my time and the manager's time and somebody else's time kind of navigating. Sometimes it's employee relations, sometimes it's performance. So just
You said that,
before the,
you said, you
yeah.
said employee relations. And so what
Yeah.
you want to do with employee relations is you want to get into what does that exactly mean? Because when you say to your senior leaders, we'll spend less time with employee relations, that's too vague for them. Instead, you want to be saying things like, we'll spend less time with Sam yelling at at Halima, okay? Or we'll spend less time with Seema trying to get people to come into work on time. You're going to have to name it specifically. And you're going to have to give really clear examples about how to do that apply to your organization. So one of the things that I know from building a management case for your organization, is you have to be able to talk in specifics about your organization. And people are going to say, your leaders are going to say, whoever you're talking to is going to say, where did you come up with that number? And you're going to say, I came up with it in this way. Is there a way you would prefer? Is there another way that you see that you would like me to measure it? And they probably aren't going to have one, but don't get into defending your number. Instead, say, I think we need to start attaching some numbers to this. And I'm open to your ideas about if you feel that this is wrong or too low. Your numbers are going to always be too low, by the way. They will always be too low. Because we can't, poor morale, when people are so motivated and excited about things, great stuff happens. And that's very difficult to measure, but we know it. We know when we work with an employee who's excited, the results we get. So this is how you're going to do it. And I am happy to work with some of you individually to make this business case if this is what's standing in between you and a great, robust employee training program. So Allison, thank you so very much for coming online and sharing what's going on for you. I think that the topics, the issues that you said are very universal. They weren't really different from, so I'm sure everybody could relate with yours. And so thank you very, very much. Okay, we're going to skip ahead and I'm going to talk to you about some of the topics that might be useful that other organizations have selected for their training programs. So the role of manager, I think this is a critical question for new employees, but also for managers. One of the things that we want to point out is managers often get promoted because of their subject matter expertise. That's almost always why they're promoted. However, they weren't born being taught how to manage. And if they had a poor manager, they've actually probably learned some poor habits. So one of the things I think is important to talk with people about and teach them is the role of their work as a manager, which is to stop doing, which is what they're comfortable doing, and to start leading and setting goals and motivating employees. All of you said this one in the chat, and none of us, raise your hand if you are the expert in giving and receiving feedback. All of us need more work on that. I know that the more I teach giving programs on giving and receiving feedback, my family members say sometimes to me, can you just treat me like your clients? Because that basically is it saying, can you be more patient? Can you be more open? Can you be more resource, kind of that. Managing it, performance and goal setting. Somebody said in the chat earlier, accountability. That's where that comes in. Accountability, how to hold people accountable in a respectful and appropriate way. Managing disagreement and channeling workplace conflict. Again, that's another topic that no matter how often we have it, we can always learn something from it, learn more from it. Blame, shame, and it's not my fault. This topic was developed for an organization where there was a tremendous amount of blaming. And then we found out it was useful in a lot of organizations that, and how to stop that cycle and some techniques for when you're in in a meeting, or you're seeing an email chain where there's a lot of blame happening, how to turn that. All of us need more of this all the time. Time management, creating positive daily habits, and taming that darn email. And we can add to that whatever you're messaging, whatever you're using, whether you're using Slack or Meet, however you manage that, that's an important topic. Some organizations use interviewing and selection skills and do this training. Pretty much everybody in your organization has been interviewed, but do they know the legalities? And someone wrote in the chat that that, you know, the cost of a lawsuit is always more than the cost of training. That is for darn sure, but we do want to get to it before we get to that place of lawsuit. I was at a SHRM meeting just last week, and I was presenting there, and one of the attorneys said their people are more, they're suing more. They're suing their employers more. It's definitely, the environment is definitely changing. Engaging today's workforce, and today's remote workforce, multi-generational workforce, creating inclusivity and making sure we're inclusive in the workforce, presentation skills, meetings and facilitation skills. Are the meetings used well? Building a resilient workforce, creating a welcoming and inclusive workplace. What am I missing? What can you put in the chat some of the things that you've offered that that aren't on this list? Because I think those of you who've been offering all of these training programs and have comprehensive programs have probably done some really cool things that I don't know about or that I've forgotten. Oh yeah, thank you, Edwina. FMLA, maximizing a hybrid work schedule, microaggressions, absolutely. Focusing on strengths and Strengths Finder would be is a fantastic one. Delegation usually goes with your role as a manager. Developing employees ready to be promoted, career pathing, absolutely, and succession planning, especially at every level. DEI, which is often in the umbrella of inclusive workforce, absolutely. How do they feel each day when they walk into your organization, which is creating a welcoming and inclusive workplace first? Career conversations and succession planning. These are fantastic. So some of these things have different names and they're caught in different umbrellas, and that's great because we want through our employee development programs and our training to keep offering some of these important topics in different ways so that people get it more than once. As I said about conflict resolution and avoiding difficult conversations, you could have that training every day. You'd never be an expert. There would always be one that stumped you. And our best managers take that type of work very, very seriously. Okay. So here's the question that I want to share with you about. Let me advance to the next slide. Got off of. Should I take my family on a vacation together? And for those of you who thought you were tuning into a training program, let me show you why I made this segue. For those of you who are in the 8% or even the lower 50% of people who are offering really very basic training to stay just barely ahead of the law and don't have much of a training budget, I want to share with you the importance of providing as much training you can, even if it's not the luxury training that we've talked about. So the analogy I'm going to share with you is, should my family take a vacation together? In a perfect world, you would have, let's say, depending on the size of your family, let's give you a big extended family and you want to do a reunion and you've got 50 cousins and aunts and uncles that you want to take, and you've got $10,000 per head for this vacation, and you can plan your own special, you can rent an island, you can do whatever, you can have cooks and you can have all types of activities and an activity director and an events coordinator. And wouldn't that be fun? And for some of you who have a pretty extensive budget, you're going to be able to design some pretty fantastic training programs. Not on the level that vacation that I just gave you, but still very good ones. And what you're hoping from this luxury vacation is that people will have this bonding experience where they are sharing this wonderful experience with their family members, and they're getting closer together. But suppose you don't have that. Suppose you and your family want to create a family vacation. You have $0. You just put a new roof on your home. You're in debt. What can you do? And this is when I say, go to the grocery store, get the marshmallows, get the bars of chocolate, find a local park, and bring everybody in your family together and roast marshmallows, make s'mores, and tell stories. That too will start the family vacation and the family experience of that one night together. And in that experience, you talk about what else would you like to do? So let me bring this back to you and your training departments. If you don't have much of a budget, I want to encourage you to still do some basic training. And some of the ways that you can do that is, do you have a manager who's an extraordinarily effective manager who does a great job with performance appraisals? Can you ask that person to do a 1-hour lunch and learn? Can you find a YouTube? And I'm going to share with you some resources at the end of how some of the free things that are online so that you can get these resources. But what I want you to do is I want you to understand that by starting the process, instead of saying I have no training budget, start the process and make sure that whatever you do, you ask employees what they need, because when you ask employees what they need and they start telling you, that helps you build the case for what next. So what programs would benefit your employees? If you feel like coming off of, you can put it in the chat, but you can also take yourself off of mute and just chime in, and we'll let it be a free-for-all for a second. What programs would you like to see your employees have right now?
This is Allison. I can go. So I work at the National Association of Broadcasters. We're a trade association. We've got about 35 people managers. And for sure, the number one thing we need is a new manager training, kind of a standardized process for all new managers, as well as ongoing people manager training. So that's really my challenge. So I'm appreciative of the presentation and everyone's thoughts that are chiming in.
And Allison, we can build some things together, but you can do some of that. You can do some of that at low cost and some of that at high cost. Like you get to pick your own vacation, and make it work with your budget. Anybody else? Allison, you get special credit. You've chimed in twice. Thank you. Anyone else? And what have we got in the chat here? Time management. We're going to start a regular series of becoming asked of them being asked to do a content ahead of time, followed by a facilitator. Great. That, Claudia, way to go. That is a way to get it started. And that will get, I promise you, that's going to get things started so that training will begin to be a part of your organization. So I'm glad you've got that process started. Okay, so some of the things that people forget, we forget in our roles sometimes. You can do, should this be, how should the training be delivered? You can do monthly sessions, you can do in-person, you can do hybrid, you can do kickoffs with your CEO or division head. You can have senior leadership attend, and you can also have senior leadership attend and take it back to their team if you think they'll be effective. You can have 15 to 18 participants as an ideal number for a training program that's in person. You can have, if you have fewer, you're going to have more discussion and people get more skill building. You can have ongoing mastermind groups. One of the organizations I worked with years ago did the coolest thing ever, which is they had a training program that lasted a year, a management training program, but then they developed an ongoing mastermind group with that team where that group became, they continued to meet once a month, facilitated, and that group tore down all the silos because of their experience together. They started understanding what others were doing. If you have a huge budget, you can do guest speakers and experts like Daniel Pink or Brene Brown. So really, there are just so many ways to provide employee development. And it really depends on your organization and the timeframes you have, whether you have a hybrid group, whether people work remote, whether or not, and the skill level of your managers in providing some of this. Some of the low cost or no cost training. I am a huge fan. I wish I were on it. LinkedIn Learning is very low cost. Here are two of my colleagues and friends. They speak at LinkedIn Learning. This is Dr. Shirley Davis. She does a lot of work with DEI and inclusion. She's fantastic. My other friend here I've got posted, Meredith Elliott Powell. She's an expert in sales training. And I show you these two wonderful professionals because to get them to come to your organization for a keynote or a program would be about $15,000. But you can see them on LinkedIn Live and they're giving the same content and they're fantastic. But it's not just the two of them that are on LinkedIn Live. There are so many professionals I respect there, and they're sharing their expertise, they're sharing their content. So this LinkedIn Learning is one of the ways that I really encourage you to get us. The subscription is very inexpensive. It is based on the number of employees you have, and you can get one. And that's a way to start delivering training at a very low cost. And then you want to ask people afterwards. So, and some people actually prefer this as a type of learning because they can do it when they want, and they can do it from, they can do it in their homes, and this is their learning style. So please take a look at that. But I'm also going to share with you lots of other resources. I can tell you two of them right now. Coursera, MIT as a benefit to the community offers free training programs online, and I've taken probably 5. They're fantastic. So again, I have a whole document that I will send out to you at the end and share with you how to get that. Has anybody, could we have a show of hands, and if you can put your little hand up if you've used some of these free programs, free or low entry programs in your organizations? Oh, great. Heather, what have you used? And Mary, what have you used?
Well, I just started working as an adjunct at a local university, and they sent me to LinkedIn Learning for the DEI training.
And how was it?
It was pretty typical. I came out of a very large company, and so, we all had the DEI training every year. So it was pretty similar to that. And then I think they also required ethics training there as well. But as part of SHRM and as part of ICF, we have ethics training requirements every year. So it was pretty typical. It was nothing really new. It went quickly, but it was required by the university. They didn't care that I had other ethics training or DEI training. They wanted me to complete the LinkedIn training, and they tracked it. So if I hadn't finished it by a certain date, they sent me a note saying, you still haven't completed this, LinkedIn training. So I think there were just those two courses that they required, but it seemed as if they were relying on LinkedIn training rather than creating their own program, which would probably cost them a lot more money.
Absolutely. And they were also trying to provide some consistency probably from year to year.
Right.
So, and it's a good basic. And Mary, what was your experience? Or was Mary Sullivan?
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, that was you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I saw your hand up. So thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Some of the programs, so I'm curious again, if you'll come off mute and just share your experience. How do you feel about mandatory versus opt-in training in your organizations? You can also write it in the chat.
I think some training should be mandatory so that you have consistency in terms of the expectations and the outcomes within your organization. Particularly things like sexual harassment and things that, we have people who are recruitment. There's so many legal issues that you have to be prepared to deal with.
And what do you think about, Patricia? Thank you for chiming in. What do you think about all training being mandatory for the appropriate level?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, I've worked at a university where they had all of the training that was mandatory, and maybe the initial inclination was for liability purposes, but it meant that we had consistency and accountability across the organization. So I think the accountability part is very, very important for managers.
Does anybody have an opposite approach?
I think it also depends on your work culture, and that's not going to be a fit for all organizations. And you also don't want to have people who are kind of going to be really negative presence in the classroom. Might not necessarily be helpful, and they might not be necessarily be open and receptive to what's going on in the classroom if they're feel captive.
Right. And I think what you said about it being dependent on the culture is really important. Some organizations would benefit from it being mandatory, and other organizations, if you do have a number of people who really don't want to be there, and that shows in day one, it impacts the experience for everybody else in a negative way. And a skilled facilitator or trainer can usually turn that, but it depends on how many people have been who are there and don't want to be there. So it's definitely something that you should consider with consideration of the culture in your organization and how you get people to do things. Sometimes the organization already has a culture of whether or not they make people do things, or whether or not people do them of their own free will and see them as opportunities. So I'd encourage you to think about that. PJ, were you going to add anything?
Just simply that I think that you really do find that, and I absolutely see both sides of it, but I think when you give people an option, a lot of times there's always a reason why you can find why you don't want to attend, because there's always something else to be done. But then on the flip side, then there are people saying, well, we never get the training. I didn't receive it. I didn't, so sometimes I think HR gets stuck because you can't win a lot of the time. So that's why, unfortunately, you do have to somewhat default. Again, culture, as Claudia said, is certainly something that definitely needs to be taken into consideration. But you there are some trainings, especially like the compliance ones, where you have to make sure that people
Oh,
do.
absolutely, absolutely. And you've got to show, and from a legal point of view, you've got to show that everybody has done that. Some are, there's no question at all. Absolutely. For those of you who are planning on providing management training in the next year, and you have a budget of, you'll have at least a budget of 10,000 or more to put toward it. I'm happy to consult with you offline and figure out how to build a case and how to build a program. I've done this for many other organizations, and it's really fun because we really take into account your specific needs and your specific culture and what should go first. And that's always the question. Where do you start? What are the most important programs to do first? I want to have time to answer some of your questions. If this has been helpful for you, I would love it if you would go in and give me some feedback of the parts that have been helpful and what you've gotten that you can use with this. And even more importantly, because I hope to do it again, if there were parts you would leave out, I'd really appreciate that. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. And then we'll come back and wrap up with your questions and one more example. So we'll give you 2 minutes. Thank you for those of you who took the time to do that. If you're still working on it, thank you for that. I want to give you time to ask any questions you have. They may have come up in the chat already, but are there additional questions that we can answer of your specific culture?
Karen, yes, it's Mary O'Sullivan.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. One of the things that has been coming up lately in the literature that's out there right now. I'll put my camera on. I didn't put any makeup on today, so
Oh, no.
I didn't have time, actually. I was too busy doing spelling bee on the New York Times. Anyway, one of the things that has been kind of moving up in the HR world is switching vocabulary. So there's a lot of taxonomy in HR, and the taxonomy of employee engagement from the research I've read recently is kind of going away. And what people are, at least in the academic world and certainly some companies, not all large companies, but many of the larger companies and the ones that are more enlightened are moving towards the idea of employee engagement. And the idea is that since probably the 80s and 90s, the focus was on customer satisfaction and customer experience. So what was it like to go to McDonald's? What was it like to go to Marshall's? What made you stay in the store longer, blah, blah, blah. So now they realize that they need to address those same issues with employees, because those are the people that are creating the customer experience. And so the focus has moved back, at least in some quarters, and particularly academia, it's moved back to experience. So that's why I made that comment earlier about what does it feel like when you walk into your company every day? And as far as what I've come up with and some of the writings that I've done is that it has to start with leadership. And I can tell you, years ago, I used to work at GE and they were really good at this. So once a quarter, they would have a skip level meeting and you would meet with, a vice president or a director. There'd be a beautiful lunch that they'd put out for you. They would maybe give awards out, and they really wanted to hear from people about what was going on, and they would then do something about it. So they were way ahead of the game, and this was in the 80s and 90s. But we've moved away from that towards products and customer experience. And we've moved away, we've forgotten about what is it like for the employees to work every day, what's their experience. And so that's coming forward now.
So Mary, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And GE did have an extraordinarily robust employee development program. I don't know that it was called that at the time. And those skip level meetings are really a comprehensive way of gathering feedback. But what they did is they've studied that the trickle down effect, that when we have happy employees or reasonably satisfied employees who are engaged, they do a fantastic job at servicing the customer because they care about the customers and they're feeling cared for. So
I can tell you, in my experience working at GE, I loved working there every single day. I looked forward to going to work, if you can believe that.
Oh, I totally believe that. I totally believe that. I've been in organizations where many of the people, shall we even say most of the people, are very happy to be at work most of the time. And my goodness, none of us want to go to work on a day when we have the flu, or we all have our moments. But if we can get most of the people most of the time, but one of the things that was being offered at that time is a very robust employee development program, regardless of what it was called. And many large organizations were offering those programs, and many organizations still today do, but a lot do not. And we want to get back to that as cost. It was one of the first things to go, but now we're seeing some of the trickle effects that haven't been so trickling. We have a very disengaged or unhappy workforce in many organizations, not in every. Are there other questions? Well, my suggestion, first of all of you who came to this came because you want training. You know that it's important. And what I want to encourage you to please do is, regardless of what your budget is, do more. We know, I want to tell you that the number of people who have come to me as a result of training and said, not only have you changed how I've interacted with my supervisor and how I've worked with my staff, it's also changed the way I interact with people in my life and my family members. So sharing these skills, which often people only get in the workplace, there are other places to get it, but they often only get it in the workplace, can be transformational, not only for the workplace, but for the organization. PJ, I want to thank you once again for bringing this robust group. You said they would be chatting in the chat, and that you are so right, for bringing this robust group together. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I really value the work that all of you are doing. And don't be afraid to take baby steps.
Karen, thank you so much. We certainly do appreciate it. As I said in the beginning, we know this is an area that's important to pretty much everybody because it's an ongoing and constantly changing area. As the world of work has continued to evolve, especially since COVID, it always did anyway. But now I think that everyone is really paying a lot more attention to it, and HR has the opportunity to say, okay, I know we need this support, and here's why. Thanks for all of the great points that you gave us and different tips and things that we could be using, other resources to help us do that. We certainly appreciate everybody joining us today, and we hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Thanks so much, everybody.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
and I do have a handout, so be sure to if you didn't get it, if you didn't sign up on Talk It Up, be sure to email me so that I can get it to you.
And Karen, if you want to also send it to me, I can send it out with a summary.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.